Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to West Devon Development Management and Licensing Committee. I see so many people here this morning. Before we start the proceedings, I'll just go round asking the individual members of the committee to introduce themselves, starting with Councillor Moody.
Councillor Jeff Moody, Tavistock North. Thank you.
Tony Leach, Oakhampton North.
Neil Jory, Milton Ford Ward.
Councillor Graham Reid, Tavistock North.
Alistair Cunningham, Buckland Monacorum Ward.
Caroline Mott, Bridistow Ward.
Councillor Terry Southcott, Bridistow Ward.
Sam Wakeham, Councillor for Hatherley Ward.
Adrian Noon, Planning Officer and Case Officer for the application.
Jacqueline Houselander, Head of Development Management for West Devon.
Richard Hill, Buckland Monacorum Ward Member and Chair of this committee.
Steve Guthrie, Drew Stainton Ward and Vice Chair of the committee.
Good morning, everyone. Darryl White, Head of Democratic Services and note taker for this meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Also on the call, we have David Fairburn, the Legal Officer, who has a cold and can't be here with us today, and Christine Reeves, who is on the screen there, from who has contributed to the application we're considering today. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We've got no apologies this morning and we have a full house of committee members. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3 is the declaration of interest. In accordance with the Code of Conduct, members are invited to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Before I ask for those, I'm sure, like me, members of the committee have been bombarded with emails. I've had a couple of hundred to do with the application we're discussing today. So I declare that the fact that we've had that correspondence. Any other declaration of interest? Councillor Leach.
Thank you. I need to declare a personal interest in this application as I'm a member of the Oakhampton Town Council's Planning Committee. I have, however, declared an interest when this application came to the committee and remained neutral and did not vote. I'm attending today with an open mind on this application, and I will decide my decision based on the policies involved and after I have heard and seen presentations and listened to the questions and debate.
Thank you very much. Any other declarations of interest? No, we move on. Items requiring urgent attention. None have been brought to my notice, so we'll go on to item 5, which is the confirmation of the minutes, which you've had. Any comments on the minutes? Councillor Moody.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a brief matter arising from minute 48/25. The Planning Advisory Service of the Local Government Association publishes best practice guidance for local planning authorities and says an officer's report should make clear the weight to be given to the relevant policies and should clearly articulate the planning balance. In the minutes, it is recorded that with the previous planning application that there was conflict with the joint local plan's spatial strategy and that the fundamental issue was whether the site still needs to be progressed as an affordable housing-led scheme in order to be acceptable, and also that the site was previously considered acceptable as a TTV 27 site. Now, since the last meeting, there has been a High Court planning judgment, and it is called Perrin versus North Devon District Council, which was kindly circulated by the monitoring officer to all DMNL members, committee members. That case is relevant because it concerns an affordable housing-focused policy route. Given that TTV 27 is analogous in function to the North Devon District Council's affordable housing-focused ST19 policy route considered in Perrin, and given that the judge found that the council failure to give particular regard to affordable housing policy, can officers please identify where the continuing TTV 27 conflict was actually weighed before approval was recommended?
Right. I think to start with, the legal officer would like to say something.
I would indeed, Chairman. Apologies for not being able to be with you this morning, but I think you probably be glad I'm not. The purpose of this item is to confirm whether the minutes are an accurate representation of the meeting, not to raise matters of further debate or discussion. So Councillor Moody's point is not material. If there was anything material, and I should say Councillor Moody and I have been in correspondence about this point, but if there is anything material that arises between a resolution to grant planning permission and the issue of the decision notice, then the planning officer has an obligation to consider whether or not there are material circumstances that have changed and whether or not the matter should be referred back to committee, and that is the appropriate route by which this matter should be discussed and raised. And for the record, the case that Councillor Moody refers to is not a material consideration to in this case in the way that he describes. Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Just to follow up on the point, though, we did have a conversation about future reports, making it very much clearer how weight has been attributed to either side of the argument. So I think your point is well made. Any other comments on the minutes? No? Thank you. We now have a...
Sorry, Chair, we need to approve those as a true and correct record.
Happy to approve those. Thank you.
That's carried for approval. Thank you, Chair.
We now have a short statement from the legal advisor.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start by just saying that because I can gather there's a large number of people in the room, and obviously there's been a large number of representations received. But the number of representations received on a planning application is not by itself determining of the application. So it's not a question about the number of supporters of an application or the number of objectors to an application. Instead, the law sets down a framework which is quite clear for applications to be determined. And that framework requires, in the first instance, the decision maker, in this case, the planning committee, to have regard to the development plan and to all material considerations. And having done so, to decide the application in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations suggest otherwise. Now, in this case, there's no neighbourhood plan, so the development plan is the joint local plan by itself. And material considerations are those that are relevant to the planning application and which refer to matters of the development and use of land in the public interest, so private interests, etc. And anything that doesn't fall within that definition is irrelevant, and the committee will not take it into account. Thank you, Chairman. I hope that helps.
Thank you. And one hopes your sore throat gets better quickly. We now move on to item 7 of the agenda, which are the planning applications, of which we have one today, which is 235425 Full, land at Stockley, Oakhampton. And in the first instance, I turn to the planning officer for his report.
Thank you, Chairman. The application is, as set out on the screen here. I have adjusted the description of development. In the report, the title of the development on the first page there, it's rather clumsily says Class capital E, capital A. That should have been expressed as it is written in the use classes order, which is Class E, open brackets, A. Close brackets. That is because Class E is a wide-ranging use. A element is retail stores. That was, unfortunately, an error that was perpetuated through our system from the original application forms, but is corrected on the screen here and would be corrected in the decision notice. Right, so just to sort of introduce the site, and then I have a number of updates to run through. So they're a high-level Google Earth image of the town. The town centre is over sort of pretty much to the left-hand side. I don't know if my cursor's probably too small to see. But the site is circled in yellow on the east side of town, opposite the slip road coming up from the A30. Zooming in, this is my drawing of the red line just to indicate the site. There is a little bit triangle at the northern end, which is owned by the same landowner. That is sort of not within the application. So the red line there, it doesn't include the land across the frontage on the east side of the site. But the red line goes to the highway on the west side of the site, which is where the access would be. To the west, you have a row of residential properties, mix of two-storey and bungalows. To the right of the site, the east side, you can see the Lanes Garden Centre, and then there are two dwellings, Barton Tor at the front, and then there's a sort of, I think, Barton Tor House. But basically, they've got very similar names, but there is a dwelling at the back. You can see, sort of orientated, sort of north-south. So those are the two nearest dwellings on that side of the property. I draw your attention to that because the store is on that east side. Just to give us a little bit of policy context, the allocation TTV 15, which is essentially employment use, it should be employment-led mixed use, to the rear. This site, you can see, is the area of white land to the south of that. So it's got development to both sides and an allocation to the rear, to give you the context there. Now, that is an allocation that has been brought forward from the previous local plan, where SP22B had pretty much the same allocation there. So it's a long-standing allocation that, to my knowledge, hasn't been an application to develop successfully. And then just the red line site, as per the application, you've got a 2.77 hectare site and a little bit of, I think it's just about a fifth of a hectare of blue land to the north that isn't within the application. Right, updates. Apologies, they might be a little bit lengthy here. Firstly, apologies for my error in the report. A few gremlins crept in and I have referred to South Ham's officers in the consultation section. That, of course, should be the West Devon Borough Council officers. I like to make that distinction so you know that it's a local planning authority officer as opposed to a county council officer making those comments. Apologies for that error. I have spoken to National Highways. At the time I drafted the report, they had a holding objection in place until the 30th of March. They were a little unclear at the time as to whether they said that holding objection needed to be maintained. So I have been in dialogue with them. They confirm that their holding objection runs till the 30th of June. That is so that the issues relating to the impact on the strategic road network, so the A30, have been bottomed out with them. They maintain that at this point in time, they are not satisfied that there wouldn't be a conflict. I have followed up with our environmental health officer, and she has confirmed that in the event the members, she raises no fundamental objection to the scheme. In the event of an approval, she would be recommending conditions to control noise, to a fixed level, delivery hours, a condition to investigate any possible land contamination should it arise in the construction phase, and external lighting to be controlled by condition in the event of an approval. We've received a number of further objections, summarised there in terms of highway safety, impact on the town centre and local economy, accessibility. There's several case made that it's all edge of town. It wouldn't be convenient. People with limited mobility would struggle to get here unless they owned a car. Reiterating concerns made about environmental and landscape impact, including on the residential properties either side, and they maintain that alternative sites would be better for this development. There is one particular reference to a fatal accident that occurred to the east of the access. We are aware of that, but that was the circumstances of that accident do not affect the county council highways officer's view. It is, in terms of matters of road safety, that was an accident due to the circumstances of that particular occasion that are not felt to be relevant to this application. Further, approximately 200, very much in a sort of well, they've been sort of all mailed in, handwritten. Not all have made their way to my desk yet, but I have summarised the ones that I have seen. Essentially, that the sentiment there is that this is needed. There are issues of congestion in the town centre arising from a cluster of supermarkets and the school. That causes all sorts of problems in the town centre, and this, taking one of the supermarkets out would relieve that. It would also serve the new housing areas that obviously they're all on the east side of town. It would provide an up-to-date shop and support Oakhampton's continued growth in a sustainable way. And then the sort of in more detail there, just the issues in the town centre, population growth on the east side of town, current store is of its time, I guess is the best way of putting it. It is not compatible with the applicant's current offer in terms of new stores. It's more accessible out here, and that there would be some economic and social benefits of additional jobs and investment, including sort of increased spend, improved choice, and obviously, if approved, it would free up the existing site for another development. And the view there is that this wouldn't harm the town centre. And I think there's a reflection that some people are travelling afield for their shop, and they would be drawn back to town, and therefore there would be shorter journeys. And they refer also to the sustainability bits and bobs that are built into the store in terms of solar panels, air source heat banks, etc. The applicant, who was present at the site visit to let us on, has listened to some of the issues that were raised and just provide some clarifications. Firstly, there is a new foul main sewer that will be provided from the nearest point somewhere to the west to the site. That would be an adopted Southwest Water. I think we need to sort of reflect that is a benefit. I think current properties along there to the west of the site don't have access to main sewerage. They would have after this, if they went ahead. It would have its own water supply provided to the site by Southwest Water. Clarifications about topsoil. It's quite shallow, 400 mil, and then it's a sort of, it is porous. Which I'll come on to it in a moment. It does soak away, but there is a loose end there. There was some concerns about whether or not this is a water protection zone. I think it is classed as this secondary A aquifer, but it's not a source protection zone. This is relevant when we come on to drainage because the current proposal is for an infiltration tank that would soak away into the ground. There was a question raised about the footpath across the site frontage. The applicant's willing to discuss that with Devon County Council if that were deemed to be necessary. It's not been requested by the County Council, and as you saw on the slide, the red line doesn't include all of the frontage across the site. So there would be an issue to find out who that owns. If it's in county-owned land, it might be deliverable. Parking spaces that have been reduced, I think in my report, I think it's 121. It's in fact as a result of some changes to get some more landscaping in, I think it was. It's 191, but the Highway Authority is happy with that level of provision. There's been a debate in terms of the impact on the town's centre, how much uplift in spend the store would generate. I think initially it was down at, put at about £400,000, and there were some eyebrows raised at that. That's been reviewed. We're still not agreed on it, but the applicant accepts that the uplift is probably more in the region of 2.12 million. Our consultants' latest views, which were received very late in the day, unfortunately with the timing of the agenda deadlines, but we had been pressing the applicant in terms of their sequential test to look at the North Street sites, which had recently been vacated by previous users. We felt that they had potential. I think after a lot of toing and froing, I think that is more or less accepted, that they don't work for a supermarket of the offer that's being looked at here. So the outstanding issue there is the existing store site, which we don't feel has been thoroughly explored as an option, as basically an alternative to the site that is proposed today. The applicant is in a bit of a standoff with the lead local flood authority, so the Devon County Council flood advisors on major applications. The infiltration tank is in sort of like the centre of the site. They have done soak-away testing, which have showed that the soak-away has worked through the winter, when we obviously had quite a wet winter. The LLFA sort of say, well, we actually need to see a longer period of ground testing and timing for that soak-away. So we need to know that will work in perpetuity all year round. And they feel, I think the standoff there is they haven't done the soak-away testing for long enough. The applicant points out that if alternative draining solution, apologies, typo there, they're saying it wouldn't require any significant site change because that infiltration tank would be changed to an attenuation tank. But the alternative off-site discharge points would need to be agreed, and that is something we would definitely need to be going back to the LFA and others, because we need to be satisfied that there is a consent to discharge to wherever the water would be sent. So that's a loose end. Right, going back to the application details. This topographic site plan here, I show this because you can see the curve in the contours between the houses either side. That is the high point on the site. So there's a little ridge there. It's not hugely noticeable, but I've got a slide that does show it. So would be cut and fill to get a level site for the car park and the supermarket. So, but also for the drainage point, the back of the site goes one way, front of the site goes the other way. So it's, if we have to agree off-site discharge points, it's quite complicated. So that is an issue. So the site layout plan, supermarket building on the east side, orientated north-south, car parking to the south and to the west, with sort of a green area for some landscaping retained around the perimeter of the site. There are some trees in the east boundary. We've done some work there, and the tree officer has had a good look at that. The ground level lowering can now, he's satisfied that could be achieved subject to tree protection measures without harming the trees that are on that boundary. And then there's some provision for some planting at the rear of the store there. So the elevations there, it is a sort of, I think they do approach this with a sort of fairly standard approach to the store. The middle picture, that is the roadside elevation, that is glazed. So that would be the prominent one when viewed from the south, from the Dartmoor direction. And then the top one is what you would see from the car park, the main car park, and the rear elevation is the long one below that. So sort of fairly standard there. There would be a little bit of give and take on the materials if, in the event of approval, we would be able to control those and secure some use of locally reflective materials, but essentially it's a standard store of standard materials. Just zoom in a bit more detail. There's a bit of signage there. That would not be covered by this application. And then on the left-hand side of the top drawing, slightly lower there, that's your delivery bay. So the vehicles would come through the car park and reverse into there. And then there's just that one opening on the rear elevation. And then just a little bit closer up there, just to show you those end elevations. In context, so showing it between the two properties, so you can see Barton Tor on the right and the adjoining property, which is two-storey on the left. You can see that sort of provision for some screening there across the frontage. And then the sort of the access on the left-hand side. And then, apologies, that seems to be the same slide. Sorry, that was crept in twice. There's just the detail of the internal area, so sales area just over 1,500 square metres, and then the sort of the ancillary sort of storage and staff spaces in the heavier colours and the blue. And solar panels on the roof. Boundary treatment there, which would, in the event of an approval, be agreed. But essentially, it's quite low key. There is some security fencing in the heavy blue dotted lines, sort of, I think, to the rear. And then the key bit there is the pink, which is an acoustic fence around the delivery area to contain noise. The environmental health officer is happy that with that in place, the noise from the delivery activities would be contained at an appropriate level, given the background noise levels. Surface treatment there essentially is hard-standing tarmac with some sort of the concrete for the delivery area, then sort of block paving for pedestrian parts of the site. And then just sort of the landscaping around the site. In the event that we were to accept that the store is justified and this site, the development of this site is appropriate for the proposal, the landscape officer is content that a meaningful screening could be provided, subject to, obviously conditioning it and securing the detail. Then this is the just sort of high-level drawing of the water drainage system. So you can see the big blue block there. That's the infiltration chamber. So picking up all the surface water through interceptors, the bottom of that tank would be porous and the water would soak away into the ground. That is the design. And then you've got along the road to the west, there would be a new foul main sewer installed, away to a connection point over to the west. There is just all that bit of slightly close-up detail on that drainage tank there. There are, there's a lot of detail in here. The issue here is whether that infiltration would work over the long term. And there's not just, at this point in time, there's not quite enough information for the LFA to withdraw their objection. And then just the access there, zooming in on that, so there's all appropriate radii and sort of width of there. The highway, Devon County, who are concerned about highway safety on the local road network, accept that that will work. And that internally, it all tracks for the likely delivery vehicles coming from whichever direction. The national highways are concerned that with the movements coming in and out of here, they are not convinced that traffic emerging from the slip road would be unimpeded. It may be that's a technical matter that could be resolved with a bit more time, but we've been asked to determine the application at committee today, and there hasn't been time for that to be resolved. Because it is a holding objection from National Highways, we would have, if we were minded to approve this application, it would have to be referred to the Secretary of State, because we're going against the advice of National Highways on a matter of road safety of the strategic road network. Right, this one's a heat map here. The red is cut, so the areas where the ground will be lowered. The green is fill. So the front of the site where that ridge is, that's where the cutting out would go. There would be some fill in the green area to the rear, but as you can see from that sort of bar chart, there is more cut than fill, so there is a net export of material as a result of this. So there would be a bank at the back of the store, so either where they've cut in at the front, a little bit of a bank at the back where they've built up. But essentially, this is to achieve a level site or very gently sloping site for the car park and access to the store. Then a couple of sections through here. I've just got these in more detail, but I just always like to put up the full drawing as submitted by the applicant before zooming in case there's any missed detail that I'm subsequently accused of leaving out. So that's why that's in there. But in more detail, top section is A and then B, which are the little plan next to it to show where they are. So A, you can see there at section B, probably at the front of the store, you can see the bank on the right-hand side, so that would sort of lower the store relative to the residential property that side, and at the rear, not as pronounced. And then coming through the site here, so obviously section C across through the car park at the front, and then across the car park, section DD. So there is a retaining wall where they've done the fill at the back of the site. And And then coming back just a couple of other sections, FF at the bottom, that just really goes through the delivery area, just that little bit that sticks out on the northern end of the site. So that is lowered because the delivery ramp obviously comes in, so the back of the lorry is onto the sort of roughly level with the floor level of the store. So it makes it look a bit higher, but the reality it isn't. It's just that the delivery ramp is lowered. And then there's a sort of long section through the store itself at section G. And you can see that just dotted line showing the hump in the land that is levelled out. Okay, coming back, some photographs. These are from the landscape and visual impact assessment provided with the application, which provides some sort of, this is sort of what our landscape officer has assessed. So the top one is looking east across the site. You can see a vehicle emerging from the slip road. You then looking back the other way, you can see sort of that bank at the front of the site. Then stood within the site, top one looking back to the west, the adjoining property, and then still stood in that, so I suppose that's the southeast corner of the site, looking back across the site. You can see that sort of blue building, that's the neighbours' little stables, which are immediately adjoining the site. And then just looking, that's at the back of the site, looking north is the top one, and then again, just looking across the frontage, the lower slide. And then just sort of stood at the back of the site, looking south towards Dartmoor. And you can see there, top one shows the two-storey dwellings to the west of the site, and the bottom one shows the sort of bungalow at the back of the site on the east side. And then just looking back across there, those are those little stable buildings at the far end of that fence, and Dartmoor in the background. And then looking from the west side of the site across towards Barton Tor. So you can see them sort of slightly more prominently at the front, the bungalow at the front, and then the other one is in the trees to the rear. There is one building on site, which is some sort of historic shed of no merit, and obviously would be removed. And then just across the site frontage. One there, just last one there, just looking back to the north. These are sort of my slides here. So you can see here, sort of getting the camera down low, you can see it sort of, there's effectively a horizon in certain views. That's that ridge across the front of the site. And there's those two properties, one drive on the left-hand side going to the property at the rear, and then you can see the property at the front, just the corner of it there. There's just looking across the site to the north. Wrong button. Sorry. All right, there's that little cluster of stables. They would be sort of essentially next to a landscaped area on the edge of the car park. And then just looking back across the site, just to give you a sort of idea of the relationship of the three nearest residential properties. And then looking up along that's the east boundary. You can see there's a number of trees in there, which we need to be safeguarded during the construction phase. There is the property to the rear, just to give you an idea. And there is the property more towards the front. And then just really trying to capture that sort of levels there, the hump across the site. You can see it is quite pronounced when you're actually on site and close up. And then just looking back across those properties. Right, this one, just to give you an idea, I managed to capture a lorry, just a little short clip here to give you an idea of the height difference. Watch the lorry disappear as it goes across the site. So there's a substantial bit of land there that's going to need to be lowered. In terms of the landscape officer's assessment of the site, the landscape visual impact sort of assess where the store would be visible from. That's the pinkish areas. Number of photos provided. The landscape officer is always largely content with this. It's sort of reasonably contained within these viewpoints. And I think the key one that I sort of picked out here from Crediton Road, so away to the north. You can see the site indicated there, and there, you can see the other sort of big box industrial architecture on the industrial estates on the east side of town. So it would be seen from this direction, with those sort of giving it context. From the other side, limited views until you get further away. This is courtesy of Google Earth. This is obviously at A30 speeds, but it is quite open when glimpsed from this side of the site. So you can see the store would sit behind that sign effectively. So, sum up the key issues. The fundamental issue here that there is difference between ourselves and the applicant in terms of the impact on the town centre. Two tests there, the retail impact in terms of the spend and what have you, and the sequential test, have we chosen the right sites? Have all other reasonably sites been robustly considered? In particular, and that's the outstanding issue here, in particular the existing town centre site where they operate from. At this point in time, we don't think that has been fully and robustly considered. And has the impact on the town centre been understated? There are a number of issues going on here in terms of, we're not quite agreed on how much uplift the proposed store would generate in terms of sales compared to the existing store. That is sort of started off, it was only going to be 400,000. It's now suggested that it might be 2.12 million. We think it would be nearer sort of 4.5 million. That sort of uplift is not explained where that is coming from, and the concern is that this would draw out trade from the town centre. The ability that currently occurs for linked trips to occur would be lost, given the distance we saw on the very first slide, how far out of town we are. Those are areas where there are disagreements. Our advisor is with us today in terms of any detailed question there. There is the bit that has been dropped that the applicant may choose to close their store and leave town. Our position is on that is that whilst that would not be a good news story, we think that would be probably less impactful on the town centre than the proposal to move the store to the site under consideration. So the position at this point in time is that fundamentally the retail impact on the town centre has not, we think it's been understated, and we think it would be significantly adverse. Second issue is, reason for refusal is that we have a very special habitat here, lowland meadow. Very rare habitat would be lost without justification. Even if we accepted that there was a justification for a store in this location, our ecologist is saying this is such a special site that just because BNG gives you replacement plus 10%, you shouldn't just lose it. It's so rare. It's worthy of county wildlife status. So at this point in time, because we don't have a justification for it to be for the store to move here, we're saying that this is, there is no justification at all for the loss of this habitat. Because the BNG obviously, we don't get that far because we are recommending refusal. The BNG in its own right, if we were to agree that would be incredibly onerous on the applicant. The impact on the strategic road network, we have not got to the bottom of the possible conflicts there, and National Highways are maintaining their holding objection until the end of June. Surface water, there may be a technical solution there. We just haven't had the time to arrive at it. It may be that it will have to change to an attenuated scheme. We would then need to agree the discharge points, but that has not been resolved, and if we're asked to determine the application today, that has to be a reason for refusal. And finally, if we don't have a reasonable justification to develop the site, the landscape harm, which inevitably arises when you go from undeveloped to developed, there's no justification, there's no benefit that outweighs that. So that, I think, weighs against, notwithstanding the fact that if it happened, we could mitigate it. If it's not justified in the first place, we shouldn't move on to just jump straight forward to the mitigation. So, coming back to the planning balance, we do acknowledge that there would be benefits. There would be some extra jobs. There would be, in the event of approval, the BNG, 10% BNG. We have to give that moderate weight, some weight in the planning balance. The provision of that new foul water would be a benefit to some of those residents up there who could then connect to it. There would be investment in town. In theory, if the applicant's case is correct, there would be an uplift in turnover, which would be money spent. But whether that could be cited as a benefit to the town, I think is limited, because that's private benefit to the operator of the supermarket. So, contrary to that, we on the harms that I suggest outweigh those benefits are the impact on the town centre, the loss of the meadow, at this point in time, the unresolved issues relating to the strategic road network and drainage. They all weigh against the development, and then that's pushed, I think, firmly over the line by the harm of the unjustified introduction of a sort of substantial developed form to this site. And for those 5 reasons, my recommendation is one of refusal. I would just ask that we would probably need I think I've got it on reason for refusal number 1. I've referred to the relevant paragraphs of the NPPF. I think I would need to introduce the correct paragraph references to the reasons 2, 3 and 4 and 5 in terms of the conflict with the NPPF. But subject to just that little tweak to those reasons for refusals to bring in those paragraphs, the recommendation is as per the report. Apologies for the length.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for such a comprehensive report. So now, members of the committee, have you got questions you wish to raise with the planning officer? Councillor Moody.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask the question about the turnover uplift. It's been suggested that it went from 400,000 to 2.1 million, and it's estimated, is it officer view that it could be double that, up to 4 million? I just wanted to know, how has that been reflected in the traffic and the trip generation assumptions in your deliberations?
There is possibly a discrepancy in there somewhere, in that the uplift in trading may not be exactly reflected in the highways movements. That in itself is probably more indicative of our doubts about the retail impact than a highway safety issue. The difference between us is, we sort of still maintain that, based on the evidence we have got, or with our interpretation of the applicant's supporting case, based on the advice of our retail advisor and her experience elsewhere, that the uplift in trading we think is understated.
Councillor Jerry.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your report. I want to come back, if I may, to the joint local plan, which I think we all still believe should be the start point for the policy discussions that we need to have. And in particular, in your map earlier highlighted these areas. Policy TTV 14, which is not the area that we're talking about, as I understand it, but is still part of the development area within Oakhampton, has an item in there that allows for the development of appropriate local facilities to support new residents and to enhance the sustainability of the existing area, including local retailing facilities of a scale and format to meet local retailing needs, where it can be demonstrated there will be no significant adverse impact on the existing town centre. So it seems to me that we've already said in our policy that that is where a retail site ought to be located, which will provide many of the benefits that a large number of the supporters of this proposal are looking to try and achieve. Is that your understanding as well? So, and my supplementary question to that is there anything that we know about that is in course that will provide that retail space within that area?
I think unaware of any proposal to bring forward a local centre in the current, I think, the TTV 14 area shown on this plan here. I think there is, I mean, Jack will correct me if I'm wrong, I think there is provision in that policy for such thing. I think the key issue with Dev 14 is that it is a sort of commensurate with the sort of local needs. I think that the intent of that is to allow sort of small local shops to open in new residential areas. And again, subject to impact on town centre. So a small local shop is probably, in a large development of 1,000 houses, which is probably what we're talking here, is unlikely to draw shoppers away from the town centre. I think this proposal is not commensurate with Dev 14 intent to provide a small local shop. So I think this is very much town centre first type development. That I think Dev 14 isn't engaged by this proposal because of its size, because it is just not commensurate with a local need. The applicant's own supporting case says that is.
Thank you, I understand that. And that would also be commensurate with the NPPF paragraphs 90, 95, which deal with this type of development as well, where as policymakers we ought to be looking at edge of town centre rather than out of town sites first, if there is anything suitable. But I think we probably determined from your update that there's nothing that's identified that would meet that criterion, edge of town centre at the moment. Would that be correct?
I think essentially that's correct. The edge of town centre is we've not identified any sites there. I suppose it would come down to a bit of a debate. The town centre is marked there, so I think the existing store is just at the very northern tip of the town centre, marked on this plan that we're showing here. So it is a town centre store site already. So that's sequentially the first place we should be looking, town centre.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've actually, before I ask specific questions, for the benefit of the public, could you explain to everybody what a TTV 13 and 15 is, specifically because they are so close to the proposed site, so that people understand what that's all about?
So they are both employment employment allocations. I think TTV 13...
Proposed for employment or existing?
Yeah, they're from the local plan. I think TTV 13's largely done. I think there's stuff in there already. TTV 15 is not been developed yet. My understanding is there is no extant permission for it. So it is there allocated for employment or employment-led mixed use. Okay. So fairly broad there, but the expectation it will be the old traditional industrial uses, what we used to call B1.
Thank
and
you.
then B2
so
and B8
that
uses.
leads on to my specific questions, Adrian. Either side of the site proposed, there's lots of development, and we're now being told that this site is of great ecological importance. I presume that the other territories nearby were of similar nature prior to development, perhaps quite a while ago. So on this particular site, what species are specific that are rare? How many of them are? What type are they, as opposed to the generality of the ecology in there and across the road and in the fields to the north?
The ecological value comes from a habitat designation rather than a particular species. So it's lowland meadow. There is a mix in there. I would have to dig out the ecology reports to say exactly what it is. I suspect it has become of such value because of the way it's been managed. So, thereby you get a huge diversity of plants in there, as opposed to a sort of mono grass culture, ryegrass that you would get in sort of where it's been dairy farmed.
In essence, you're saying it's not been farmed actively.
I think probably the value of
TV15 from our site visit looked like farmed land from the distance.
Yeah, I think it's down to how the land has been managed, how whether the habitat that we've got on this site has developed elsewhere. yeah, I couldn't tell you what is in there, because I've not had sight of any ecological reports in relation to the TTV 15 site, because they haven't emerged.
Any other questions for the Planning Officer, Councillor Southcott?
The other day at the site visit, I asked a question about underground aquifers in the area, because I'm a little bit concerned. I believe the houses on either side are using boreholes for water supply. I've heard that somewhere or read it somewhere. So putting a lot of surface water into the ground, which will be contaminated coming off a car park, bothers me a little bit, that it may be affecting the underground water supply.
We've not come up as a water source protection area, so there's no planning constraint on that. The water going into the soakaways would, in the normal circumstances, we would expect intercepts to clean the water up. That would be part of the technical detail of the drainage strategy that would be looked at by the LLFA. But yeah, you wouldn't be allowed just to wash all the world's water dirty down there. It would have to go through some kind of interceptor to clean it up, and that would be looked at in the technical stage, if in the event that the LLFA are happy with the infiltration model.
I have a couple of questions, just for clarification, and then we'll come to Councillor Leach. You talked about highways and drainage as two of the constraints here. Am I right in thinking that where the committee might, drainage could be conditioned, but highways couldn't, because the holding objection requires the Secretary of State's intervention?
I think if we got ourselves into that position, I think we would be suggesting that any approval would need to be subject to the LLFA withdrawing their objection and the views of the Secretary of State upon notification. So that it may well be that the LFA says, okay, more technical detail, we can agree that to discharge it by condition. They might stand their ground and say, no, we don't withdraw our objection, in which case we would be back at committee to consider that.
Councillor Leach.
Is the water issue, and it was coming back to the previous question. My concern, the cut and filler is going to be something like 2 metres, I think you said, 2 metres to actually cut and move it about. There's how much that will disturb any water that's running through that land, which is running down towards those boreholes. Has any work at all been done to see what that effect will have on those boreholes?
I can't answer that question. It is, I think it's probably embedded in the outstanding issue that the LLFA have, in that they haven't seen enough data about the soakaway operating over a period of time. They want 12 months monitoring. And I would guess that all that information would fall out of that. It's one of those issues that, if we were to be looking to resolve that, we would need to flag with them just to say, are you sure that this is going to work given the ground level? I mean, I'm sure they've noticed the ground level changes, and I'm sure they're aware of ground pollution issues. They certainly are very quick to ask for intercepts when they deem it to be necessary.
Okay, before we move on to the registered speakers, final call for any members of the committee to ask the planning officer questions. No, good. Right, we move on, and we have 4 registered speakers this morning. The first of which is Susanna Clemo, who is the agent. Welcome to the committee. Do come over here. Darryl, can you... Okay, as is the thing of these committees, you have 3 minutes to address the committee. They then have an opportunity to ask you questions, and start when you're ready. I'll give you a nod when your time is up.
Good morning, I'm Susanna Clemo, the Regional Head of Property at Lidl in the South West. Lidl have been proud to serve the community of Oakhampton for 25 years, but we've reached a critical crossroads. Our current store is no longer fit for purpose and has been prioritised for relocation because we believe the store is becoming brand damaging. Without a relocation, the future of a discount supermarket in Oakhampton is at risk. The proposed Exeter Road site is the only available and deliverable location that meets our needs. In relation to the reasons for refusal set out in the report, we ask members to consider if these reasons are sustainable. Refusal reason 5, landscape cannot be justified. Just because the development would change the character of the site does not mean it is harmful. Our proposal is in line with policy Dev 23 and Dev 24, which has been confirmed by no objection from the Council's Landscape Officer or Dartmoor National Park Authority. Refusal reason 2, habitat. We are exceeding the statutory biodiversity net gain requirement through off-site compensation, retaining as much of the existing habitat on site as possible, and planting 54 new trees agreed with the Council's landscape architect. Reasons for refusal 4, drainage. Devon County LLFA are satisfied with the proposal subject to 6 months of infiltration testing. Members can condition this testing, requiring Lidl to submit our current March to May data showing groundwater at 3.8 metres below the proposed infiltration tank. Further testing in October and December would provide 6 months' worth of data before infiltration is in use. We are confident for the nature of the ground allows for infiltration to work, especially in a critical drainage area complying with policy Dev 35. Reason for refusal 3 regarding highways. Devon County Council highways have no objection. Following National Highways request, we have undertaken a road safety audit and a solar PV glint and glare assessment, both showing no predicted conflict. We believe these 2 reports remove National Highways objection if submitted onto the planning file. Reason for refusal 1, sequential and impact. We believe it's incorrect to say insufficient information has been submitted. The Council's independent advice from 30th of March now accepts there are no suitable alternative sites, and we have shown that our existing store has an inefficient footprint that cannot be extended or reconfigured. Our relocation decision is not just about turnover at Lidl, it's about securing our future in Oakhampton and providing a better offering for customers and staff. Our impact testing shows the Council's consultants have overestimated the impact by not fully understanding the nature of how a discount retailer works. Finally, we must listen to the community. Our consultation has found over 80% of residents support this move and want a supermarket that serves the growing population to the east of the town. We've worked hard to address the comments received and are committed to getting this project started on site this summer to secure the future of discount shopping in Oakhampton. You are reminded to support this application. We ask that you allow your officers time to review the material and request the application be brought back to committee next month. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well done for keeping to the time. The committee now has an opportunity to ask you questions. I might start. On the debate that the Council's consultant, retail consultant, and you have been having, we seem to have moved from a position where the trading benefit of relocation was 400,000. I think that was your estimate, and your estimate now is 2 million. I just wonder, in a short space of time, why that figure has quadrupled.
Yeah, we have listened to the advice that has been provided and reflected on our figures that we believe. As I say, this isn't just about turnover for Lidl, which is not why we propose and look at it that way. We've gone back and looked at the data that we've had, consultee comments as well. We've looked at what we call cannibalisation, so from other Lidl stores, people that might come back and shop at Oakhampton, which has increased our figure on that turnover as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions at this stage for the agent? Councillor Reid.
Just for those who don't live in the area, can you just explain the difference between the size of the existing store and the proposed store? How much different are they in terms of actual retail space?
Of course, so our existing store, the sales area is just over 1,000 square metres, and our proposed is 1,529 square metres. Our warehouse and our ancillary area for our staff is 185 compared to the new proposed of 225. And our warehouse existing is split into two currently and is 37 square metres, and our proposed is 430, which shows that for us the operations of the inefficiency of the existing store, how we have the two warehouses, will now change to our proposed layout.
Can you give some indication of the existing store, what sort of footfall you're getting on an annualised or monthly basis, please?
I'm afraid I don't have those figures off the top of my head, but they should be in our retail impact assessment.
Okay. And do you have a figure for what you would expect at the new site to be?
Again, it should be in our retail impact assessment. I'm afraid I don't know off the top of my head.
Just provide those data.
With a bit of time, we would need to pull it out of the system if it is that important.
Councillor Jerry.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming and answering our questions. I want to ask a question, if I may, and see whether you can give us a bit more information about the road survey and the traffic survey, because for my mind, just anecdotally from my own observations, the access is one thing that seems really, really difficult. The access is literally metres away from the exit from the A30. We're also talking about just being in the process of opening a new car park at the new interchange station a bit further down the road, which will have 200, I think, spaces, which will be entering and leaving from that site, particularly at peak times. If you have cars entering and leaving your site, some of them turning left out of the site, right out of the site, and some of them trying to turn right into the site, both across the prevailing traffic flows that are going up and down, I can see it very quickly stacking up back to the slip road and creating a queue back onto the A30. So when I'm sure your assessment was quite thorough. Can you explain to us what sort of things you looked at and what the impact from that assessment actually was, what the results were?
Yeah, so the road safety audit is not something that we undertake ourselves as an external party, and this was only requested by National Highways on their latest response on, I believe, the end of March. So that's why it wasn't provided prior to committee. That assessment we pointed it to look at what National Highways' concern was about HGVs turning from the site. That it was not picked up in this assessment. It was deemed no conflict at all there. In terms of what we've discussed with Devon County Council, we've provided modelling on our proposed access, the A30 slip road and the garden centre access, and the modelling data of all of the flow of traffic around that area, and that has provided that the access proposed is acceptable. Devon County Council have reviewed all of that modelling data, National Highways have reviewed that modelling data, and National Highways had no further comment on the access proposed. It was a question about the HGV, which is what the road safety audit has shown. And to be very transparent, the road safety audit did pick up about a possible right-hand turn lane into the site, which is not something that our modelling has shown, nor have Devon County Council requested or National Highways requested. However, if that is required at Section 278 detailed highways design, then that is something that we would look to propose as well.
Councillor Southcott.
In the documents we've had, there was a comment there about the arc of entrance in and out of the site. I must admit, as somebody who's been driving for many, many years, I would find driving a big wagon, that a very tight turn. why is it not, a larger radius, particularly on the east side?
All of our modelling has shown, and our tracking, which is the standard that what we do, is shown that it is acceptable and that it does work. Devon County Council and National Highways have reviewed that. The site entrance is actually 10 metres wide, so it does provide quite a wide stance for an HGV to get round.
Before I come to Councillor, I would like another go at my original question, if I could, and perhaps also asking Mrs. Reeves to come in and comment. Back to the subject of the initial assessment of the trading uplift of 400k to 2 million, and you suggested that you've looked at various new factors and you've come to a different view, as it were. The officer's report suggested that actually 2 million might be an underestimate and it might be as much as 4. So I'd just like to bring in, if I could, Mrs. Reeves, to seek her opinion on where this figure might actually be between 400k and 4 million, because there's quite a difference.
Hello. Can you hear me all right first?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, lovely. I think I fully agree with you that there is a very big difference in those numbers. My initial analysis was done when we were being told it was 400k, which just doesn't make any sense. And I say that as somebody who is both a retail planner, but also I have experience. I've got 20 years of experience of working for a food retailer. So I'm looking at this with that knowledge. I'm not just sort of purely a planner. What I did was look at alternative ways of estimating the uplift in turnover, and very importantly, the figure I came up with was sort of the outcome of two different assessments. One of them was based on the information submitted by the applicant, because what they've done is, in their reports, they have provided a table which looks at the company benchmark sales and how, if the store were to trade at benchmark, standard average levels, what level of uplift would be seen. And that table, it's been updated in their submission, and this suggested an uplift of the latest figures of 3.38 million. So what that basically says is, if you've got a store of, as they say, it's 1,000 square metres net, or looking at the convenience area, the convenience existing, it's currently 800 square metres. If you took that up to what they're saying, which is the sort of 1,200, 50% increase, you'd expect turnover to go up by a proportionate amount. Now, the survey is suggesting the store is trading at above that level. But that approach of using the benchmark uplift in sales is an approach that has been used for another application for Lidl in another location, prepared by the same agent. So that is a starting point. That figure in the original submission was higher than the 3.38 they take to now suggest, but that table has actually got a small mistake in it as well. So it will probably be higher than that. And that, of course, does not make any allowance for the change in location, which again, the Lidl's own case is that they want the sort of high-profile site to attract passing trade. So you would expect the uplift to be more than that. The other way I looked at it was going back, as I said, to my sort of past experience, back to the days when supermarkets were doing a lot of extensions. And there was a sort of standard practice there that equated roughly to the fact that if you increase the store size by 50%, your turnover would go up by about half that, i.e. about 25%. And that was, accepted generally in the industry at that time. If I ran that figure and did it that way, again, that's where I got the figure of sort of 4 to 4.5 million uplift from, based on, and that relates to current or actual store performance rather than the survey, rather than benchmark. So again, that was suggesting an uplift of around 4 to 4.5 million, assuming it was treated like an extension. Again, that doesn't allow for any uplift in trade as a result of the change in location. So that was the justification for where my figures come from. The figures that have been put forward by the applicant, as you say, started off at 400,000. There's then been a suggestion that it might be 1.4 million based on the impact on the existing town centre stores, although how that additional 1 million has been derived is not made clear at all. And then it's suggested that 0.72 million would come, and this is, I believe, is a Lidl's owned information, from other stores in the area, other Lidl stores in the area, which is being suggested as clawback. I don't dispute that 0.72 million figure may be correct. It's not something that is supported by the application submission, in that I think there is actually very little trade from the study area that has been put forward going to other Lidl stores in the wider area. So it suggests to me that a lot of that trade would be people perhaps beyond Oakhampton deciding to come to Oakhampton Lidl rather than another Lidl in the area. But I still, like yourselves, I don't actually know how they've come up with their figures, although I can explain where my figures come from.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we had another question from Councillor Reid.
Yes. Susanna, could you go to page 10 of our agenda, please? Where it lists the objections from the local parish. Well, if you could just go through and give your comments on those objections, please.
The concerns about drainage? Those comments?
Let me just bring it up on my own page here. I was scooting about here.
That's all right.
So, yeah, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then a bit further down you've got development, policy issues as well. Could you concentrate on the policy side of it, please?
Policy side?
Yeah, where it says that Oakhampton TC adjoining brackets object. Policy that we determine on, so whilst the above part is relevant, we've discussed that. Mm-hmm. I'd like to know what your views are on those specific policies.
In terms of development policy 29, specific provisions relating to transport, we believe that we have provided sufficient information from our transport assessment, our modelling, to show that there is effective and safe transport system in the planned area. In terms of transport as well, I also note that we will be providing, agreeing a Section 106 agreement we've proposed with Devon County Council Highways, agreeing to two requirements from them if they require to put yellow lines on the road if needed, and also £100,000 to provide a safe pedestrian crossing from the nearby bus stop if required. Dev 25, nationally protected landscapes. Degree of protection given to landscape from South Devon, Tamar Valley and Dartmoor National Park. Again, Dartmoor National Park Authority have commented on the application. We've taken a number of their comments on board. We've revised our landscaping scheme to mitigate visual impact from Dartmoor National Park. And we believe that we are compliant with their non-objection to the application on those points. Dev 20, place shaping and the quality of built environment. Development appraisal meets good standard of design contribution positive to townscape landscape, protect and improve the quality of the built environment. Again, we've had no comments on our design for us to provide any comment on. If that is a requirement of the council, then I would be open to discuss that if required. Again, visual impact, there are no objections from visual impact from Council's Landscape or Dartmoor National Park on the application. East of Oakhampton, land to the east of Oakhampton is allocated for residential development. And then again, TVV 15, again, we've discussed that. There is the nearby allocation for employment use. Again, as part of our internal investigation looking for sites, we have been looking for sites in Oakhampton for over the last 5 years. We have considered, and is why we've provided detailed information in the sequential testing about those other sites. We don't believe that any are available or suitable for our needs. TVV 15 would not be on a main road, which is one of our particular concerns when looking for a new store location. TVV 26, development in the countryside, protecting the special characteristics role of the countryside, in particular, isolated development in countryside. I don't believe this is isolated development. It's surrounded by allocation and built form. But we have tried to provide mitigation because we are sensitive to that. We amended our red line, as you can see on the screen. There are 3 pockets around the site where we retain the existing habitat. We have tried to limit where we can impact on that. However, with some of the comments from Dartmoor National Park, the council landscape architect, we have added to our landscape scheme of the 54 trees, native planting around the site at their request, which has removed some of that natural landscape as well. But we are retaining as much as we believe that we can on the site. We will be providing additional support through construction to the neighbouring hedgerow on the site as well to limit any impact to what is existing on the site.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Bit of a marathon, but we got there in the end. Right. Councillor Guthrie.
Hi, we just want to keep you working. I'm just interested in how Lidl's model now works, because from what I can gather, Lidl is saying that they're now, notwithstanding they've been, good service to the town and many other small communities, but am I correct in that what we've heard is that Lidl now have a one model, so that they no longer wish to do any other stores other than the size and scope of what you're proposing?
The size and scope of what we propose, we do have our standard format layout. It's what we believe is the most efficient for us. It's what our customers want. It's been tried and tested over many stores, and it is our best layout, and that's why we put it forward. We do amend that layout to suit depending on every site that we look at. So we will tweak it, but ideally, we do come forward with our standard layout. It's the most efficient for us and what we look for on a site. We would have loved to have stayed on our existing site, but it is not big enough. We're constrained by rivers on two sides. It's in a flood zone, so any proposed application would have to suit that. It doesn't have the car parking requirement. Ideally, we would have over 120 spaces. The proposed site has 119, so we're almost at that. And we did give a couple away for landscaping provisions as well. We cannot fit that on our existing site. The current site, we've extended twice. Our footprint does not fit. It can't. Internally, our sales area cannot have our new concept that we want to roll out to stores. It cannot stock the range that we have now in stores. We cannot improve our fridges and freezers because of the plant equipment that would be required. Things like that. We've looked at all of that on our existing site, and that's the reason I say that we've been looking for another site for a number of years, because this isn't a snap decision from us. We look at our whole estate as a whole of where we can look, and absolutely, as the sequential test requires, we look from the best place, which is a town centre, out, and that's where we've reached to this site.
So you do make smaller little stores?
On sites that we look for now, our new sites, our sales area is what we work off, and that we do not want smaller, and that's this one.
Thanks.
Just one more. I want to go back to the traffic issue. You said that you had done a traffic assessment, but I believe that you haven't done a road safety audit. So, because I don't know whether members are aware, there's a big difference between a traffic assessment and a road safety audit, because highways, or not highways, national highways, their objection relates to the junction geometry and the conflict of vehicles, and that's what the road safety audit would do. So have you done a road safety audit as well?
We have. Submitted on the planning file is our modelling, or our consultant's modelling of the site. The road safety audit was only requested by National Highways on their latest consultee response at the end of March. That road safety audit was undertaken last week, and we had the results yesterday. So that's when I say we've had that assessment done. There is no conflict for the HGV, which National Highways were concerned on. However, it has brought up the possibility of a right-hand loan. And so that could be submitted onto the planning file if required.
Okay, I think we've exhausted the questions we have for you, and hopefully we haven't exhausted you. Thank you very much. Okay, we now move on to our next registered speaker, who is Councillor Jan Goffrey, Oakhampton Hamlets Parish Council. And to avoid any confusion, Jan, of course, is a West Devon Borough councillor, but is here in her capacity as a parish councillor.
I'm wearing my parish hat, yes. As I say, I'm here to represent Oakhampton Hamlets Parish Council, within whose boundary the area of this application falls. Firstly, the Parish Council were very conflicted initially. We were hoping to hear the final response from Highways England. There may be a lot of public support, but the public do not always realise the full impact of proposals like this. Everyone recognises that the several hundred new houses on Crediton Road need a local shop. This, however, fails to supply that need as it is too far to walk and carry shopping home. Basically, it's on the wrong A road. Crediton Road is seeing a huge increase in traffic and needs a retail area, but primarily a road widening scheme, as it is currently no wider than the average B road. Secondly, the two access roads from the A30, one from the Exeter end, is just before the bridge on the Belston side and has the national speed limit. The exit from the Launceston side is opposite the proposed site and also has no specific speed restriction initially. Cars come flying round the bend, and there are already lots of near misses, screeching brakes and the odd rear ender, because drivers do not know of the expansion of side roads affecting this town access. plus the commuter traffic that the new station will bring to the area. When the A30 is closed, either between Whitton Down or Sawden, and at holiday times, this could be several times a week. The alternative route is through Oakhampton town centre. The thought of cars trying to cross this already fraught situation to attempt to get in or out of an additional business with parking for over 100 cars is terrifying. Thirdly, the county ecology report has recognised this is the last of the traditional hay meadows in this area. I see from the plan the bottom corner has been set aside. If this plan goes through, can we ensure the management of this is given to Devon Wildlife Trust? The topsoil should also be offered to someone with plans for a wildflower meadow and not just carted away and dumped somewhere. The seeds within it are scarce and precious. I have two more environmental concerns. The local borehole is used by the adjacent residents. My concern is water pollution of this by the soakaway given on these plans, and additional late night light pollution on the edge of Dartmoor, which has a dark sky designation. Finally, if Lidl move from the town centre, their site will be sold, no doubt to another retailer, so the traffic reduction argument is specious. That town centre traffic will be far better served by an inner ring road, which I attempted to get built when I was mayor in 2016, 10 years ago, and traffic is now worse. There is land on Crediton Road, which, with highways improvements, would better serve the local population. If Lidl are successful, we need speed restrictions starting at the exit points of the A30, a roundabout at the Lidl entrance, plus any pedestrian crossing must have traffic lights. And finally, for Councillor Reid, fields in the TV15 area are farmed, but they are improved grassland, which means there are no wildflowers. Thank you.
Very much. Sit tight, just in case members of the committee have questions for you. Are there any?
Yes.
Councillor Reid.
Yes, thank you. I'll ask Councillor Goffey, thank you for your presentation. I'll ask you to address the same issues that you have on page 10 of the agenda, as I asked to the applicant's representative, Susanna.
Yes, I've basically covered a lot of them. I haven't got the 10 of them in front of me. Oh, thank you, Chairman. Right. So, yes.
I think it's important that we hear what your views are.
Yeah. Yes, well, the concerns about drainage I've mentioned, concerns about the highways concerning the junction I've mentioned, plus the quantity of traffic, insufficient car parking provision. I think they've increased that since we first looked at the plans. 3 HGV movements per day in the car park. If you've got big lorries coming in and out, that's going to restrict the car park even more. Plus, of course, it's going to hold up traffic as it manoeuvres in and out because of the splay, which has already been mentioned. The colour of the building is inappropriate for a rural setting because it's very bright, as of course it's Lidl's and it's advertising its presence, so of course it's going to be bright. The build is classified as E3 urban when we believe it is E2 rural because there are fields opposite, fields behind it currently. So it is still within the rural area of the hamlets. Better tree screening is needed to hide the building from Dartmoor, which I think they've changed. No consideration for mobility scooters. When you're coming up and you need a safe entry and exit for mobility scooters, because I think there was something I noticed with curbs, drop curbs, that was the thing, there was no visible dropped curb. Walking to the store is not ideal, as most is uphill all the way from town, and buses are infrequent. I have had several elderly people, residents in the town, who use the local Lidl store and are absolutely devastated at the thought of it moving or closing because there's no way they could get up to the new store.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Councillor Goffey? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We now have two registered speakers who are the West Devon Borough Council ward members for the ward, Councillors Dexter and Councillor Leach. So if Councillor Dexter would like to go first. welcome Councillor Dexter. You know the routine. You have, as a ward member, 5 minutes to address the committee, and we then have a chance to ask you. When you're ready, off you go.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to express my support for the application, and I'm going to make 3 points. First, to talk about the key issue of road safety on Exeter Road. Secondly, the need for retail outlets in the developments to the east of Oakhampton. And thirdly, to talk about the effect of the application on the town centre. So in terms of road safety on Exeter Road, I've been really pleased to hear the updates that have been provided. And we need to consider the issue more broadly than just this application. There are 2 related issues. Is the volume of traffic on Exeter Road and the proximity of the proposed sites to the exits on the A30. Exits, not just one exit. So taking the first point concerning the volume of traffic, I think there's already a need for a reduced speed limit on Exeter Road, and we should be pursuing this. And this is really important because it affects all the current and potential developments to the east of Oakhampton, including the new station, as Councillor Jory previously mentioned, with 200 extra parking. So this is going to increase the volume of traffic. Further, there's the NPPF, which has a presumption of further developments around stations. So obviously there's an increased pressure on Exeter Road. And turning to the proposed site, I mean, I take seriously, I think we all should take seriously the concerns of national highways. It's a bit disappointing that they've just put in the holding and not yet respond, but I think it's already been raised. It's possible for the committee to be subject to the approval of the Secretary of State. And I mean, the report said the road safety audit has not been provided. Well, we now know that it has been provided. And the guidance of from the Society of Road Safety Auditors states that audit should take place if a scheme is likely to change road user behaviour, e.g. a new development. It obviously applies to Liddell, as well as our development in the interchange station. And I think that we need to strengthen our case for the reduction of the speed limit from both the exits. And it needs a 30 mile an hour rather than the mixture of 60 and 40 as it is in the moment from both the east and west, because that's really going to be really beneficial for the road safety and for the development of Exeter Road. Now, I don't think, well, the audit's needed anyway. The audit's needed anyway. So turning to the second point about the developments in the east of Oakhampton. I mean, the estates in the east of Oakhampton have few facilities other than houses. They need lots of things. They need a GP, a dentist, but for the purpose of this application, they need shops. And as already been mentioned, obviously Crediton Road is the ideal. There is an outstanding approval for a small shop on Crediton Road, but it is too small to be viable. That's why one of the reasons it's not been built. This application is going to partially fill the gap, and it makes a start. And without it, residents will continue to shop in stores in Exeter and also add traffic to the centre of town. So the final bit is its effect on the town centre. Now, I'm confused about this because there's a lot of numbers being bandied around. And the way I read it is the retail advisor has made an assessment on the basis that the closure of Lidl will mean that it won't be replaced by another supermarket. I stand to be corrected on that. It doesn't seem to be a credible assumption that it will not be replaced by another supermarket, because I understand that Lidl intends to sell the existing site, if they're successful, as is with the current application. And in my view, the existing site will be bought by another supermarket. So the centre of town will continue to have the same shopping facilities as it already has. So that means also that the 40 additional jobs that the new site are genuinely additional, will be genuinely additional job. Now, it's all been raised that there is a major issue of traffic congestion in the centre of Oakie, due in part to the three supermarkets position. Now, that's going to be, regardless of whether this application or approved or rejected, is only going to be cured by Relief Road, which I really think we should have, and we should pursue that.
Ask you to draw to a conclusion.
So, in summary, the application, I think, as far as I can see, it'll have little or no effect on the town centre, and it's going to add 40 jobs in Oakhampton, and we still need the inner Relief Road. It's going to be a great benefit to the residents of the east of Oakhampton, while not being in a perfect place, but it's still going to be a great benefit. And we need to take this issue of the road safety, the speed limits in Oakhampton on Exeter Road seriously, and we need to pursue this. So therefore I would suggest that the committee approve this application, subject to the caveat about approval by the Secretary of State. Thank you.
Questions for Councillor Dexter from the committee. Councillor Mott.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that the existing provision for a store within the developed houses is too small. Can you tell me, please, what that is based on? What evidence do you have for that?
Well, it's the ad pad by Nexus Way and Roundabout.
Yeah, I'm aware of where it is. I'm
so
asking for what evidence you have that it is too small.
I have no definitive evidence. I have been told, I have been informed by AdPad recently, not last year in fact, that while they're developing that, successively developing based on the sales of houses, that they're having difficulty. They've had difficulty in the past trying to get stores, people to man that, rightly or wrongly. That's my understanding.
Okay, so no evidence that that provision that's already there is inadequate then?
Well, planned. No, it's not there.
Okay, other questions? Councillor Reid.
Councillor Dexter, thank you for your presentation. Looking at the aerial view, which is something I like because it gives me a good clear view of an area which I know slightly. The site looks like it's a bit off the edge of the property area in terms of housing, but I gather that there's a lot of housing development imminent in the Oakhampton area in terms of population growth and national targets and all that stuff. Have you any information that you can share, and how much will it affect the location of that store in the long run?
Well, there is one, of the existing planning, there's one to be built out just off Crediton Road. My point I was trying to make was, with the NPPF, there's an assumption, a presumption, that development will go around a station. And therefore the station is just down the road. So therefore it is likely, it is my assumption that there will be continuing pressure on there. And also, if you look at what the previous presentation, there's also additional factories and commercial development behind it, which is also likely to add. We want Oakhampton to grow, and it's also likely to add to the volume of traffic. That's my issue, that the problem will only grow, and that we need to address that issue on Exeter Road.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Planning
much.
Officer would just like to come back on the issue of development around stations, I think.
Yeah, just for clarity, members, it's the consultation version of the NPPF which talks about increasing development around the stations. It is not in place currently. We currently have the 2024 NPPF, which doesn't talk about that, which is the current piece of evidence that we have to consider. So it's not something that we would need to be considering at this stage, because it's in the future. And whether it will end up in that document or not, we at this stage do not know. Thank you.
Any other questions for Councillor Dexter? Nope. Oh, thank you very much. And our final registered speaker is Councillor Leach. Are you happy to stay where you are? Okay. You know the rules. When you're ready, off you go.
Well, I wasn't going to speak at all, to be quite honest, but I was going to do it through debate. But I haven't much to add to what Councillor Goffey put forward, because more or less they were my general thoughts, listening to her. And what we should be doing is just looking at this application, not what might be coming elsewhere. And as far as I'm concerned, it's down to policies. And it's the policies we should be looking at and determining this application on that. I fully understand. I think at one time in the town it was about 50-50, 50-54, 50 against. I think as it's got closer to this point, more people have got engaged in trying to promote it. But I'm sure they don't really understand what we have to look at. One of the things they keep saying that once Little moves out, traffic will be better. Well, it might be for a short time, but someone else is going to take over that site, which means the traffic will go almost back to where it was. Where this site is at the moment, it might draw people from elsewhere, but it's going to be extremely difficult for people coming from the west of the town who normally could walk down to the town centre if they wanted to and walk back the steep hills to try and get back home. But to walk 2 miles, which is what it is not going to happen. So there'll be more traffic heading that way and back in through the town. So I think that could actually be counterproductive. Yeah, so for me, I'm looking at policies.
Thank you. Good reminder for all of us there. Questions for Councillor Leach? Councillor Moody, have you got one in mind?
Well, I have a question. I have a question for the retail expert, which is something that came up that the speaker mentioned about if the current site is taken over by another retail outlet, should that not be included into the retail assessment, impact assessment? And that was because that changes things completely. If you move from one place to another, that has an impact. But if the previous site is taken over by another retailer, that should be factored into the assessment? I'm just wondering how that has.
I'm happy to turn to Mr. Reeves in a second, if you're standing by. But again, to re-emphasise perhaps what Councillor Leach said, we're looking at the application in front of us, not the application that might have been in front of us. And in the application in front of us, there's no reference to the store, were it to move, being taken over by another retail outlet.
I do realise that, but in considerations, I would expect that all opportunities, all variations would be taken into the impact assessment.
Okay. Well, Mrs. Reeves, could you address that specific point?
Certainly, yes. I mean, there has been nothing from the applicant as to what would happen with the existing store. They have said that they would be, I suppose they're basically saying their mind is just close it anyway. So it's not something that I have specifically considered in my numbers, nor is it something that they have assumed. They have assumed that the store is closed and they have made no allowance for any retailer taking that unit over. In practice, if a retailer were to take it, it would be either food or non-food. My personal view, if Lidl were to be prepared to sell the site to a competitor, which is may or may not happen, what food retailers out there would want to come in to that site when there is increased, significantly increased competition out of town. Any new food retailer coming in will be competing with the proposed Lidl, the Co-op and the Waitrose. And, the number of food retailers looking for sites is relatively limited. It's mainly the discounters these days, or the other operators are looking for smaller convenience stores, more linked to sort of areas of new housing and the like. So I think it unlikely that a food retailer would, in practice, want to take that site. A non-food retailer may be interested, but again, we have no information on that, and it also has to be thought about in the sense that the non-food sector is experiencing its own challenges. There are not many retailers out there looking for new space, and so we'll come down to whether they wanted that to come to Oakhampton.
I mean, I draw a line there because we're moving into the hypothetical rather than the...
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, there are no more registered speakers. We've done with that. So we have had a chance to interrogate the registered speakers and the planning officer. We're now in debate. But before we get into debate, the planning officer wishes to make a statement.
Yes, sorry. I think what I would like to say is the idea of in-town and out-of-town retail is a fundamental part of the planning policy process and planning policies. It's very well documented in the several MPPFs that we've had over the years. It remains the case. Town centre first is the reality. And our joint local plan, which and the policies within it around retail are still relevant, and whilst parts of our local plan are not are out of date, these policies are not. And so I would encourage members to really think about the principle that is being addressed here. There are other issues, obviously, in the reasons for refusal, but the principle of allowing an out-of-town supermarket when there is already that supermarket in the town centre where it should be to support the viability and vitality of the town centre seems to me to be something which members need to very, very seriously consider when you go into your debate. Many thanks.
Thank you. Now in debate. So would any member like to start the process of debate before we move to a recommendation? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. One reason why I think these meetings are so valuable for both us on this panel, but also for the wider public and for applicants in general, is the thoroughness. So first I'd like to thank everybody involved, the officers, etc., for the thoroughness of the presentations and the details we've been given. Sometimes it's almost overwhelming. I look at this application from 2 points of view. One, we've got policy to discuss, and I thoroughly recommend what our planning lead has said on this matter. On the other hand, of course, we've got lots of people saying it's a good idea and they're locals, and in the long run, there's doubtless going to be more housing. Looking at a map on as the way the town grows, it's going to be a site. In the meantime, we've got a valuable meadow, not very big, but any loss of ecology is always a disaster in many ways, but that's us as humans. So on the balance, looking at that, I will vote with the officer's recommendation, notwithstanding the fact that I wish in many ways some of the other issues could be addressed more thoroughly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other points of debate? Councillor Jury.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I guess like everybody else, I'm weighing things up and a little conflicted, but I think, like my colleague Councillor Leach here, I come back to policy. And I think we have some policies here that we should bear in mind, including TTV 14, which seems to indicate that that is where this type of development should go. And in particular, policy Dev 26 about protecting and enhancing biodiversity. I'm also very mindful of the National Highways remit on this and the caveats that they've placed. And although there are the assessments that are on the file, I find it really hard, having driven through that junction many, many times, to see that cars entering and leaving that junction at the rate that the use of the parking spaces would indicate is not going to have a significant effect, because my feeling is that it will. And then if you factor in the railway station and a 200 place car park on top of that, it's going to, there is a plan that's needed, I think, for that end of town and the highways and the roads and how we sort that out. But I think as things stand at the moment, I would be looking at policy and the two policies that I've quoted, whilst recognising the need for facilities in the eastern side of Oakhampton and the public interest in this area, would feel that marginally I'm going to come down on the side of supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Leach.
You're going to tell me off because I'm going off at a tangent. So,
going off at a tangent, Councillor Leach, please don't.
Right. So we get a nice yellow circle. Just to the right of that, you can see a very narrow lane that goes straight up. Well, it's not quite straight up. Now that's a rat run today. It's a dangerous rat run. There's accidents almost every day. It's a single carriageway. And that's being used now for people to get from the new estates back round to here to Molehaven and other public facilities. And that, I'm sorry to say, that would be used even more if this were to be built in that position. If you go up the Crediton Road, then all the land, the top dark patch up there, that will all be developed in my time. Well, if I last that long, which at the moment I don't think I will. But that's earmarked not only for properties now, but it's also adjacent to the station. And to get from that site round to this site, to this shop, is difficult. There is a shop on parcel, I'll call it ADPAD site, parcel 2. And it's a conditioned shop, so it has to be built because it's conditioned. Whether the developer says, oh, it's not big enough, that has been always being discussed, as I understand it now, whether it can be made bigger to make it more affordable for whoever takes that on. But that, as I think Councillor Goffey said, that's got to be the area. If we're going to serve that area sensibly, that's where we're going to have something bigger.
Any other comments before we move to a recommendation? I've just got a couple that I've been picking up as we've gone along. Clearly, there are issues over the National Highways holding objection, and it's an uncomfortable feeling to approve something when a major consultee like that has clearly got some issues. Drainage we've talked a lot about, and there's a active debate between whether enough drainage information has been done or hasn't, but the authority clearly thinks more should be done. And then we come to the potential damage to the centre of Oakhampton, and I'm very concerned about anything which would damage a town centre. We've seen town centres over the last 20 years change, and some town centres have almost ceased to be town centres because there is so little of interest in them that people don't come. And for my sins, I went through every consultation on the website last night, and there are a couple of hundred of them. And the majority of people that supported this application said that one of the reasons they did support it is that we'd no longer have to go into Oakhampton for their shopping. And so I allied that to the fact that the retail trading uplift, which initially was almost trivial, is now significant, which does suggest to me that people will change their habits if there's a store here and will cease to go into Oakhampton in the volumes that they used to. And that in turn will damage the centre of Oakhampton. And a core policy, coming back to Councillor Leach's point, a core policy of the joint local plan is the vitality of town centres. And so I certainly shall be supporting the officer's recommendation. Right, are there any other comments that people wish to make before we move the recommendation? Okay, well, the officer's recommendation...
Can I just say that the recommendation needs to add the MPPF paragraphs?
It does.
And also policy SPT 6.
Well, would you like to restate the recommendation? Yeah. It's little changed, but it's clarified.
Okay. So the recommendation is the application be refused for the 5 reasons set out at the end of my report. The first reason relating to the impact on the town centre. Just wanted to add into their policy SPT 6, the high level policy that sort of guides Dev 16. Apologies, that wasn't in there. The other reasons 2, 3, 4 and 5 just need the reference to the relevant paragraphs of the NPPF to be added to them in addition to the stated policies of the local plan. Subject to those changes, the recommendation is as set out.
So, Councillor Meady.
I was just going to say SPT 6, just for members' benefit, is that it focuses on main town centre use primarily. Town centres first, edge of centres, then edge of centres, and then and only out of centre if there's no suitable alternative. Just so people are aware of what that means.
Thank you. Members of the committee happy to accept the proposal made by the planning officer with the corrections or the addition of the references to the MPPF? Are we all clear what we're voting on? So I now ask for those, I make that recommendation for refusal. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Guthrie.
Just a second.
So we're now voting, just to remind you, so we all know absolutely what we're voting on. We're voting on whether we support the officer's recommendation for refusal. So those that believe this proposal should be refused, please show now.
That is 10 and unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
The recommendation does, the proposal, the application doesn't stand then, it's refused. Thank you, committee, and thank you for bearing with us through that quite long, drawn-out process, but I think it's an important application and important that we did it properly. Okay, we now move on through the agenda. No more planning applications. Okay, a break? There'll be a 2-minute break, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 5-minute break. Okay, if I could have the committee back, please. Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Mott, you come and join us. Okay, welcome back. I think we continue to live stream. So we're now on to the item 8 on the agenda, which is the appeals update. Starting on page 55. Over to the planning officer.
Thank you, Chair. This, obviously, these are just the, there's only 5 appeals this time. There were a lot last time, I remember. So this is a split decision. So it was an application for a certificate of lawfulness at Torview, 3 April.
Oh, you are?
Can you not hear me?
No.
Oh.
Someone couldn't see the red
Oh.
button.
3A, Pool Hill, Bristow. The application site, as you can see, is in red on the plan on the screen. And then there's a slightly more detailed block plan underneath. The appeal, sorry, so I had some notes and they're not there, so, which is a bit annoying. Wait a minute, 1 second. I'm just going to... Can't get it off the screen, so just bear with me. Apologies about this. Okay, I'm going to have to do it from memory then, because I can't remember. So I can't find my notes. So just bear with me and I'll share it again. No, it's not letting me go. My mouse isn't working. I need to rejoin it, yeah. I can't get out of the presentation. Oh, okay. Oh, sorry.
pleased to know there's lots of finger pointing going on.
My mouse doesn't work for some reason on my laptop. It always works, yeah. Yeah, so I did actually have, on my PowerPoint presentation, I had some notes, and I can't find them. So I'm trying to do it from memory, and if I slip up, I'm sure one of you will be able to help me, because it will be probably one of your wards. So please do help me if I get into that situation. So effectively, this application was to provide an extension, to get a certificate of lawfulness for an extension at the back of the property, and also a garden room, and also to split the garage, which was an internal works. And the inspector, and we'd recommended refusal on the basis that you couldn't, that it needed to have been in place for 10 years or more. The garage subdivision was carried out in 2014, but the garden room and the extension were carried out in 2019 and 2020. So effectively, the split decision was that the garage subdivision, and the reason that needed permission was because there was a condition on the original consent which required the garage to be used as a garage and not as anything else. And they had actually subdivided it and then used it as a gym. So, but because that was done in 2014, 10 years had lapsed, and therefore that was granted a certificate. But the other two elements, which were only carried out in 2019 and 2020, did not achieve 10 years. And so they were declined. So that's why it's a split decision. That one. The next one. The plans to remind me. This was, so this application was effectively for a new access to the land, which you can see on the screen there. There was an issue with drainage in relation to the access. There were concerns that the existing drainage situation resulted in flooding on the road. But as part of the planning application, there was an alternative drainage system proposed, so the inspector effectively, on his site visit, and he visited the site sort of earlier this year when we'd had the terrible rain that we'd had, and he felt that the drainage scheme that was in place was fine, and therefore did not agree with the single reason for refusal on drainage. So as a result, that appeal was allowed. Sorry, I'm a bit hesitant because I haven't got my notes. But the next application was at Wooden Down. It was a Class Q request. The site area is up the top there, on the top of the image. It came in after a submission of a previous application to convert its 3 barns to 10 dwellings. This application, which was refused, was for 7 dwellings from the 3 barns. And the application was refused on the basis that there would be an impact as a result of the trees that surround the site, both in terms of the impact on the trees, but also in relation to light. So with a Class Q application, one of the criteria that needs to be met is to have allow sufficient light to cross the building, because often barns of this nature are quite wide span, and it's quite difficult to get light to the centre of the building. And the inspector agreed with us that because of the proximity of the trees, particularly with barn 3, which is the one on the right hand side, that he felt that the conversion of the buildings was not appropriate because of the lack of light into the buildings and also because of the impact on the trees. And this next one, Higher Carley Barnes, again, appeal dismissed.
I believe this came to us twice. Is this not the one that was given permission for holiday accommodation that wanted to be permanent residents?
Yeah. So there was a permission granted quite a few years ago for the conversion of one of the barns to holiday accommodation, and that had sort of happened a little bit and it hadn't really been completed, and then this application came to us requesting that the holiday accommodation be converted to residential. And the application was refused on the basis that insufficient evidence had been placed before us to demonstrate that there was no longer a demand for holiday accommodation. And there was another reason, and I'm trying to think what that was. Was another reason for refusal, and the inspector agreed with both of the reasons that we had put forward, but I thought it was a really interesting fact that we do get quite a lot of applications for holiday units to be converted to residential, so they may have been either used as holiday or not, as in this case, and inspectors seem to be supporting our policy in Dev 15, which says you must demonstrate that there is no demand. And in this case, whilst I think a statement had been submitted, it wasn't insufficient detail about the local situation. And despite the fact that this decision was made at the point in time when the tilted balance had come into being, that still didn't persuade the inspector that we should allow a single dwelling, despite the fact that the tilted balance was in place. And then the final one is a householder application, Middlemore site. That's sort of a roof plan. So this was an application for an extension to the back of the property, but in order to, because of the level difference across the site, in order to allow no steps internally in the property, they'd had to raise the level of the land where the patio is and also where the proposed extension was, to the point where that impacted quite negatively on the neighbouring property. As you can see on the top left-hand drawing, it's all much higher than because of the changing levels on the land, and the inspector agreed with us that the proposal would be very domineering on the adjoining neighbour, and so agreed with our recommendation. That's it for the appeals.
Just one, I think I'm right in saying the application at Milton 4, erection of 5 dwellings and creation of access, I think that's being held, that's the one that's being held in public on the 16th of May. 5 houses.
Yes.
Yep, there's pins usually come to their views through some sort of paper exercise and what have you, but on this particular occasion, it's being held in public here in Kilworthy House, Kilworthy Park rather, on the 16th of May. So, if anyone...
That's a Saturday.
Well, it can't be the 16th, I'll check the date, but... date. I'll confirm the date. I'll confirm. I can't find it at the moment.
Why is that?
There is one on the 16th of June, so I don't know if that's
might be
where
the 16th of June.
Yes, I think that's likely to be 16th of June.
On the 16th of June. But anyway, we'll confirm the date. But for those that are interested in how these things work, it might be of interest to come along and watch that. And of course, Lamington was the subject of significant debate about housing numbers and what have you in the last committee. So again, interesting to see how the inspector applies the MPPF on the day. But I'll confirm that date. I thought it was May, but obviously isn't. Okay, so that's agenda item 8, unless anyone's got any other questions on appeals. So we move on to 9, which is an update on the majors. Again, there's been a update provided in red against each one. So we do these by exception. Does anyone wish to raise any particular one? Nope. All done? Okay. That concludes the formal part of the committee meeting. Stop the live streaming, please.